quite popular right now. It's an alternative to Google Maps. I think one of the big selling points is that it's open source. And unlike Google Maps, it has more support for different data sources. So I'll show a little bit about that. I'll just go through a few steps to show you how you can use Leaflet to make a map. If you have questions, just ask them. I'm definitely not an expert on Leaflet, but I was looking for an excuse to learn about Leaflet, and I thought doing this stuff was really easy to do. So basically, this is a basic Leaflet map, and if you're familiar with Google Maps or any other mapping framework, the way you set it up is very similar. So in your HTML file, you are going to include some style sheets. Leaflet has one, and it styles basically the buttons and the default UI controls. You're also going to include the code. And what I'm using is require JSLou load modules. You can just use any other way to import that script. So those are the two things you definitely need before you can get started with Leaflet: is the style sheet and the actual Leaflet script. And then if you want to add a map to the page, you need this div. That's where you're going to place a map. The way I've styled it, basically I style it at full size. So you can use CSS to style your containers for you. And your code will look like this. So here we are bootstrapping Leaflet with the required JS module loading system, but it's also a global. So if you want to access Leaflet as a global, you can do it. First thing you do is you make a map. I'm going to do that right here in this line. And this, the most important parameter is the name of the node where you're going to place your map. In this case, it was called map, so we just added it. And then you can manipulate your map in methods, and one of them is that you can say where it needs to go. In this case, we say we want to set it on Louisville. This is the coordinates of Louisville, and a scale. The same way that Google Maps work, the Leaflet map is divided in scale rates. And this is a 13 zoom level. They're about 20. The 0 is zoomed out all the way, and 20 is zoomed in all the way. Unlike Google Maps, there is no default data with Leaflet. You're going to have to manually say what layers you want on your map. So that's what we need to do here. The data we're importing is of OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is a big alternative to Google Maps data or to Big Map data. And it's made by the community. So there's actually people who use their spare time adding data to OpenStreetMap. That data is advertised in a few ways. One is there is a tile service that exposes this data as images. And Leaflet has a lot of support for including tile data in the maps. So basically, the component of Leaflet you're going to use is the tile layer. And you define the structure of the tile layer. It's that level, row, column. And that's how you include it. You just add it. So when you run this, these 4 lines of code, you basically have this. That's how you get started with adding. Unlike Google Maps, there's a lot of out-of-the-box different data sources that you can add. So maybe some of you have heard about ArcGIS. It's a big GIS company, a famous product. Leaflet has support for their services. So here, we're doing the same thing. We say to Leaflet, make me a tile layer using the same XYZ structure. But we get our map from tile OpenCycle map. can't really see it here, but it's actually published by Node.js service. So you can interface with a lot more map services with Leaflet than you would with other projects. You've added the same way. So, yeah.
So if you don't call that leaflet tile layer, you basically get a blank canvas?
Exactly. So
Okay.
if I take this out, there's nothing.
Oh, there it is.
Cache. Okay. Yeah, it's off the screen. What I'll do is I'm going to use Chrome. I'm a little bit more familiar. So this is the black map. So you have to be a little bit more careful when you work with Leaflet because you don't get really much for free, just with the basic map component. So you have to manually add your data and manually add your interaction. So both of these layers, the RGS map, so this one right here, has some bicycle trails in Louisville, or image data. So we're using that tile layer to retrieve the images from the server. The Leaflet has also out-of-the-box support for vector data, and a very popular format that is used is GeoJSON. And GeoJSON is basically a JSON format to describe mapping. So here in this case, we're using Leaflet to show all the neighborhoods in Louisville. And the way that looks in your code is going to be very similar. I don't know, can anybody follow along with the code? Is it clear enough? Is it big enough? Or should I?
It's a little small.
Okay. Maybe I'll just expand it. So this file, I'm not going to open it because it's a lot of text and it will blow up my IDE. But this is basically a big JSON file that has the neighborhoods of Louisville. You download it, I use jQuery, you can use anything you want, and we get a JSON object, a GeoJSON object basically, that has all the data in it. And we just add it to Leaflet by creating our neighborhood layer, and we say Leaflet GeoJSON. Like earlier we used tile layer, for example. This is a different type of layer. It's called GeoJSON. We give it the data, and we add it to the map. So magically, we have the vector data in there. At this point, we have already added 3 layers. To the map, and they're all stacked on top of each other, and you can't really do anything with them. So Leaflet gives you an out-of-the-box layer control that you can add to your map, and it helps you turn on and off layers and visualize them. So that is right here. This is this control right here. So when you click on it, you can say, oh, I want to see the bicycle map, and then that's what you see right now, or I want to switch to the OpenStreetMap. Or you can turn on and off the neighborhoods. It's very easy to add. You just create the control, where you say, and it's called the layers control, and you say my base maps are that OpenStreetMap base layer and my bicycle map, and they are mutually exclusive, so there will always be one or the other on the map, or an overlay map, and that is our neighborhood layer, our global neighborhoods. So we create that control right here, and we add it to the map. So that was that result that we saw here. The GeoJSON data is vector data, so it also means that you can interact with it on the client. So the images, you can't really click on a feature, it's just a bitmap. But with the vector data, you can interact with it in the UI. So in this little thing, we add a pop-up to our data. So when you click on a neighborhood, it shows you what neighborhood it is. And for these basic interactions, Leaflet 2 has a control. And the pop-ups, you do that with on each feature handle. So basically, in the previous example, you just added GeoJSON and the data and said nothing else. Here you're going to give some extra options with it. And one is that we say we're going to give an on-feature handle. And basically, what we're going to do is, for each feature in that data set, so for each feature in MD data, we're going to bind a pop-up to it that shows the name of the feature. So that's all you need to do to get basic pop-up balloons on data sets. The vector data, you can interact with. For example, you're clicking and showing a pop-up. You can also style it on the client. So when you have image data from the server, you can manipulate it, you can change the colors on the fly. You can do that with vector data. So you do that with the style option when you create a layer. So we create our GeoJSON data. We already said that we were adding a pop-up on every feature. Now we also saying the style of our features is this style, and it's basically a property value object where you say this property has this value, and you can describe line style, fill style, that sort of thing. You can also describe dashes, so you can dash lines. So basically, instead of the blue neighborhoods, we have them now with a purple outline and a greenish background. And I have one more sample. It might be a little long. Should split it up a little bit. But basically, here every feature, every neighborhood is called the same way. What you can do too, instead of having this as an object, can just be a function. And that function gets your feature, your neighborhood, and then you can use properties of that feature to return a different style. So this is this sample right here. Maybe I should explain it a little bit. It's a different data set, it's census data. And these are census tracts. And the way we color it is basically all this ordinal data, how big the population is, the makeup of different races in the city, where they live, that sort of thing. That's basically a function. And so in the sample I showed you, in the code, it builds up that function. So it gets, say, where do the males in Louisville live? In a family here, there's a higher concentration of males than females.
Indiana, they live.
So that's a nice thing. So you can style your data so that you can map your data to a color. I don't think it's very relevant to go over the code in detail. I think the important thing is here. This style, it's a function, but of course, because we're doing with this drop-down, we can't just hard code it if we need to dynamically generate that map function. So that's what's happening here. So first we do some setup. We find all the fields that have numerical data. So not all of them, but there was things like population and female, male. Those were numbers, so we filtered those first. Then we get the minimum and maximum, so we can basically map the minimum color to yellow and the maximum color to brown.
Are those your functions?
Yeah, those are functions.
They don't have special names and they could be either.
No, Leaflet doesn't provide a lot of the color mapper is basically, it's also a helper that you get the value of the property and it gives you the color. And then the color, it selects it from a large list of colors, not that large. You know, it's a color RAM that goes from those yellows to those browns, basically. So that's how we make that function. So when we change the field that we want to color on, we change that style function, and that happens here. So on our on-click handler, on our form, we create our new style map function, and we set it on our data. So yeah, that was my presentation on Leaflet. I hope you find it useful. It's, I think it's a little bit more generic than Google Maps is, and it might be worth looking at if you need to integrate data from very different sources. It's probably going to be easier to Leaflet than.
Does it have some way of turning like addresses into latitude and longitude?
No, it is purely client-side developer. So in Google you get sort of free functionality like in geocoding.
Mm-hmm.
Here.
Is there like a free service that does that somewhere? Like does OpenStreetMap have one or
Google
something
has
else?
one.
Well, no, but you're not allowed to use Google unless you're using Google Maps.
You can build one out of the census data set.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's got start and stop geo-lat longs for each street segment, and you can kind of interpolate where the address is based upon, if it's halfway through the address range, I assume it's halfway between those two points.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Yahoo has one as well.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Google you don't have to use. I think they've got a service you don't have to use a map that you can do that with.
Someone was telling me, maybe it was Ryan or someone else, I just read that you had, like, if you do anything with Google Maps stuff, you have to use a Google Map.
Well, they have like a limit on how many of those that you can send through, because we were doing something like that at work where we were finding the latitude and longitude of different offices, and there was a limit of times that you could do it per day. So what we did, instead of having it find out the latitude and longitude when the page loaded, we did it once and stored it in the database, and then just updated that. So it wasn't as many hits, because you only get a certain amount, like 1,200 or something a day or something.
Geocoder.us says it's free. I don't know what the limitations are.
I think that's Tiger Census data that we use. And that's that's open source. Not open source, but free data. But in the case though, with these geocoders that you're describing, a lot of, for example, people who have the RJS product, they can very easily create geocoders out of their own data. So there's a lot of municipalities that have their own address data. And then they have a very accurate geocoder. Because a Google map, it basically fits it into codes that they send on the street. You can make geocoders actually go to the specific parcel. So if you want to do that, you need to sort of glue all that together yourself. And then you might want to use Leaflet, because you don't need all that other stuff that Google. So,
Gee, can you add things to the map based on the latitude and longitude pretty easily though? Like if you just wanted to like put a pin on something.
That, like the same functionality, like markers.
Yeah.
Markers. GeoJSON 2, that was very complex data already with the polygons, but it can also have points, lines.
Cool.
If you purchase GIS data, oftentimes they give it in GeoJSON format. So it's a very flexible exchange format. You see it a lot. Yeah, you can use your own data if you just have a converted file or something.
Is it all front end, or is there any like tile rendering tools or anything like that?
Leaflet is all front end.
Okay.
So if you want to include data, you have to sort of have access to the service. And OpenStreetMaps is one of those services. Maybe it can be removed, depends on. But yeah, Leaflet itself is just the client-side development.
Have you ever done anything with OpenStreetMap? Like, can you like make some maps and stuff?
How do you mean make maps?
Well, I mean, like, there's probably people roving the streets with GPSs, making the data or something.
Yeah,
like
so well, you can.
Have you done that before? Like,
I haven't done it myself personally, but if you go to OpenStreetMaps, you can sign in, get an account, and it just allows you to edit the maps, basically. It also has some ways that you can upload data to it. All you can do too is export data in an XML format. And so if you want to have access, because this OpenStreetMaps data is rendered as an image, you can get the vector data basically from OpenStreetMaps if you want to have access to the raw data.
Mhm.
So,
I meant like I was wondering if I could like help out by wandering down the street
Yes.
with my phone out or something.
yes, I think that's sort of the idea.
Most of the street data set is there. There's several clients that you can download that will pull in overlays either from Google Maps or from Bing Maps, and they'll overlay them onto the OpenStreetMaps. And what they're encouraging people to do is go through using these tools and sort of outline like buildings and this is a park and designate all of those things and add those as new layers to the data set.
Cool.
It's really cool. I want to use this for something. I'll find something.
Could you, when you were changing the colors on the little zones there, can you like animate that? Like, can you fade it in and out?
I think I don't know that.
I was like, oh, it'd be cool if you could like click on the states near the water, make them sink into the water or something.
Well, because it's it's doing that with CSS, right? The coloring
I haven't looked that deeply into it. I don't know if this is Canvas or
I think
SVG
isn't
or
it Canvas?
either way, you should probably be able to.
It seems like it's SVG.
Okay.
I don't think you can use CSS transforms, but I don't, unless somebody corrects me. I think you can change it programmatically, but I don't think you can apply a CSS style sheet.
Have you seen any limitations on how much vector objects you can have? Like the level of detail? I mean, does it slow down if you back out? You've got 5 times that amount.
Right. This is already getting the limit. This is a good computer, but on all computers it would be hitting the limit already. Right. It really depends on the system you have. I mean, it's not just. I think the biggest bottleneck, and that's speaking from experience, is not necessarily the browser and the execution of it, but it's actually getting that data to the client. When you have, this is just all running locally, so it downloads really quickly. But if you have thousands of people in a few minutes downloading an entire JSON file like that, you're still able to break yourself. So that is actually the bottleneck, I think. It's more the delivery of your data to you.
With the images, the PNGs, are the images, let's say if you backed all the way out, would it get millions of images, or does it automatically have different size tiles?
Yeah. So the size are all uniform in size, but for each level of detail, they have a different layer of tiles.
Okay.
So when you're zoomed out all the way, I think I'm probably quite easy. This is the root tile.
Okay.
Level 0, the entire world. And when you go to level 1, it's in this case 0, 0, so it's top left. It's already a little bit more detailed.
Okay.
So go to level 4, it's going to get even more detailed, and we're probably going to it's just see the edge now. So basically there's the pre-rendered tubes delivery.
So it's just a grid. 0 is the running the first number is the zoom, and then the next two are just positions in the grid.
Yeah. But you do have to be careful. So we added 2 style layers here, there's OpenStreetMaps and bicycle maps. You have to make sure that the projection they're generated in are identical.
Okay.
So 9 out of 10 maps use Mercator, and that's why Google uses it, Bing Map uses it, so Yahoo uses it, so OpenStreetMap uses it. But there's sometimes styles that are in a different section, and then you cannot overlay them. So that is something you have to be careful. You don't have that restriction with vector data, for example. So if there are different projections, they can be projected on the fly.
Did you say that you had a startup or a project that you were working on with this?
No, but actually my company that I work for, we're kind of competitors of Leaflet, but it's closed source that we're doing. So yeah, I can't really show to it. It's a similar product. So I would have liked to show a personal project, but I didn't get it done in time.
Okay. That's fine. I just remember you mentioned something about it before.
No.
Great.